really excited for our first ever sort of Q&A session at Jellyvision, and we have two guys who need no introduction, but they are respectively David Heinemeier Hansson, who basically invented Ruby on Rails and is CTO and co-founder of Basecamp, and Jason Fried, who didn't invent Ruby on Rails, but is a really great thinker, smart guy, and founder and CEO of Basecamp. And together these guys have written a number of things like Rework, Remote, Getting Real. And they have agreed to come here and do a little Q&A. So I have a bunch of questions that you guys have submitted, and I will go through them. So you guys know they're going to be in sort of three buckets of stuff. First is Rails, second is Basecamp, and three is sort of like wisdom on business and entrepreneurship in general. So without that, help me welcome these guys. So starting with you, like all open source projects, it seems that Ruby on Rails started out as a solo side project, and you can let us know if that's true. When was it clear to you that Rails was no longer a side project, but in fact a significant project in the open source community?
Well, first of all, I think most good open source software has to start as a side project because it can't be the main thing you're doing. At least that's my experience, is that when people set out to, I'm going to create this great piece of open source software, they're inventing all sorts of requirements, they're inventing use cases, they're inventing how this is going to be used by people. And when you just invent stuff like that out of thin air, it tends to not be very good. That's at least my experience. What tends to be good is solving real problems and looking at the solutions you have to those real problems and say, oh, there's some commonality here. Like this problem, this is quite similar to the one I solved just before. So I can extract the common parts and I can put it into something, and that can become an open source software project, and that can work out. And I think that that's why Rails has really worked out for a decade, is because I kept just doing that. I kept seeing things that were the same and taking them out and putting it into this toolbox. And then I invited other people to do the same. Hey, here's the toolbox. You can use whatever you find in it. If you find something in your application that's not a toolbox, maybe you can extract that and put it in. That's why I think that it always has to be a side project. I'm always very skeptical whenever any open source project becomes like a full-time thing. I think it's very often the path to consultingware, which is this whole notion of making software complex just such that you have to hire consultants to use it and to explain it to you and to have training software and to have all these things you can sell around open source software, which has been popular for a lot of companies, like especially in sort of some of the other Java worlds and so forth, where you have big valuation companies who can go into big companies and sell them on how to use this open source software. So the software is free, it just costs you $1.5 million in support contracts to actually use it because you don't know how. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent here.
Well, I'm going to come back to the initial idea. So I get that you say things need to solve real problems and it needs to be good projects. But I bet there are other people who are solving real problems and have good projects out there that aren't getting world famous. Is there anything you did or anything you can now look back on and observe that helped you be successful and get awareness where other probably great projects don't?
Sure. So from the very beginning, I realized that open source is just like anything else. It needs good marketing. You can have the best idea. If you can't figure out how to communicate that idea to other people, it doesn't really matter. Like if it's just a great idea trapped in your head, who are you benefiting? So a huge part of actually having an impact, which is the fun part, I feel like, of open source software, is that you share software such that other people can use it to do great things, right? If there's only 3 other people using it, there's only so many great things that you've helped be a part of. If you have tens of thousands of people doing great things with it, you have a much greater impact, right? So to get that, you have to sell it. You have to sell it just like you would sell anything else, and you sell it by not charging money for it, but you sell it by marketing, having good marketing. So for Rails, when I put that out in 2004, one of the first things I did, for example, was having a video. It's like the original 15-minute video of how do you create a weblog with Ruby on Rails. Nobody was doing that at the time. Nobody was using video to promote their open source projects. I feel like a lot of techies have this aversion to marketing. Like, that's dirty. That's like, if you have to sell.
Basecamp has an aversion to marketing that's well publicized. Can you help jump in? Because it's like, you're like Mr. I don't believe in marketing, or historically haven't, or at least maybe not traditional marketing.
Yeah, it's not about buying ads. So when I say marketing, I'm saying, like, communicating your story. Why do you have value? Why should I use this? And I feel like we certainly do invest with that in Basecamp. We just don't we don't do marketing in like a people-intensive or capital-intensive way. Out teaching instead of out spending, which is the Kathy Sierra saying on that. And that was what I was trying to do with Rails. Like, I wanted to out-market any other web framework. So particularly like using guerrilla marketing techniques, like picking an enemy, which we did in the beginning of Java, and basically saying, well, that's a stupid way of doing things, right? Being sort of almost intentionally, at a time, inflammatory, because that's how you get change, I believe. Like, you can come along and say, oh yeah, I mean, everything is equally good, and this thing is also good. You can use whatever you want, and that's all good. Nobody gives a shit. Like, nobody's going to listen to that and actually change their perception of anything. So you have to sort of be a little more, I think, explosive than that. And we deliberately try to be explosive like that, both on the sort of on the good side of things, see how easy things can be, but also on the negative side and see, like, all these other open source frameworks or languages and camps, like, they're depressingly bad. They're not just bad, they're like bad for people. Like, they're making programmers miserable. Like, at the time, not a lot of people were talking about the notion of programmer happiness, which was, like, that was seen as this soft, emotional side where you have, like, well, computer science is like, there's math behind it, and like, there's facts, and like, none of the sort of the softer elements of it were present, and we pushed the soft elements to the forefront and said, the most important thing for a framework is not how fast it is or how much memory it uses. It is that the programmer who uses it feels good about it. And that at the time was pretty controversial. I feel like it's a lot less controversial now to say that, hey, programmers should also enjoy their job. But at the time it was.
So Jeremy asked, the myth of the 10x programmer has largely been debunked. However, you seem like a particularly productive person. And I just learned he's productive on top of also being a race-winning race car driver in his spare time. Are there any unique strategies or methods you use to achieve your productivity?
Yes. I don't think that the 10x productivity thing is a myth. What I think is a myth is that somebody can write 10 times as much code as somebody else and that all be good and well tested and wonderful, right? Where I think the 10x thing comes in is by deciding what to do, what to program, how to create that feature. I'd say when we started creating Basecamp, it was just me as a programmer. I had 10 hours a week to do it because I was in school at the time and I was the only programmer. I had to set everything up. Like, how much work can you get done in literally 10 hours in a week? The reason I know 10 hours a week was because I was billing Jason for 10 hours a week at $15 an hour. So I knew that was, this was back in 2002 where the dollar was actually worth something in the rest of the world. And I was in Denmark at the time. And I was a student. And anyway.
And I was ripping them off.
I think the productivity lies in deciding what to do. When you look at any given feature, there's a version of that feature that can be done in 200 hours. There's a version of that feature that can be done in 100 hours, and there's a version of that feature that can be done in 7 hours. The high productivity people are the people who figure out how to deliver value by picking more 7-hour implementations than 200-hour implementations. It's not that you do the same work faster, it's that you do different work, and that different work is more valuable.
Do you have any personal projects that failed because they were initially overly ambitious? And if so, were you able to ever return to them and finish them?
It might sound funny, but I'm not a very ambitious person. Like, when it comes to software and it comes to products, I have actually a very low bar in terms of ambition level. I feel like there's so much stuff that's just so poor, where the things you have to do to improve just has to be just a little bit better. Like, you don't have to send a rocket to the moon. Like, I'd never get involved with something, we used to call this science projects, right? For me, a science project was anything that was going to take me more than 3 months to do, which kind of sets a pretty low ceiling on your level of ambition. If you can't do it in 3 months, you're not going to do it. Well, that's not very ambitious. Like, lots of important things took years and years to do. So I actually, I don't think I'm a very ambitious person on that level. So no, I never got involved with those things, because that's part of being productive, is that just not, if I'm only going to work 40 hours or less a week, I better make those hours count. If I'm sinking...
Do you work 40 hours a week at Basecamp?
Thereabouts. Sometimes I work a little more, and sometimes I work a little less. But that's the goal. The goal is not to... If I have to work more than 40 hours to do the things that I want to do, I'm trying to do too much. And it's probably not valuable anyway. I find that most people waste most of their time. So what I'm just trying to do is waste less of my time. Sink less of my time into things that don't matter. Sink less of my time into overly ambitious projects that are not going to ship. Just sink all my time into moderately ambitious projects, or not at all ambitiously projects that are going to ship. And then, boom, it's easy.
Boom, it's easy. Just 2 more questions, and then we'll move on to Basecamp. Are you happy with the direction the community is going with Rails? Are there any patterns added that have surprised you?
I think you have to look at it. You can either have a very small tent where you get to tell everyone exactly what they should think all the time, and they listen to you. Or you can have a very large tent, and then you don't get to tell everyone what they should think and what they should do all the time. Rails today is a very large tent. And that's a big part of its success, right? So I just accept that since it is a very large tent, we're not all going to agree on all the things all the time. You can't get 100,000, or I don't know how many people program Rails, but a lot. Tens of thousands of people, right?
How many people here?
Well, so that's 3 out of the 100. But you can't get that many people to agree, and you shouldn't try. Like, that's not how good ideas bubble up. So you have to have sort of some divergence. But yeah, there are plenty of things that annoys the hell out of me. But then I fall back on thinking, oh, large tent, large tent, large tent. And then it sort of doesn't offend me as much.
And last one, what are the most common mistakes that you see made by open source project leaders?
Trying to be overly ambitious, trying to just do too much. Let's see, what else? Thinking that just because you built it, they will come, which is the whole notion that you don't have to market your thing, that you don't have to write either good documentation, or you don't have to create awareness about your project, or whatever. Or thinking that most projects are mostly about technology and not about people. Most projects are about people, whether it's software or anything else. So you have to manage people. And also thinking that perhaps not recognizing the limits of what one person can do. Like, if you want the large tent, if you want the big impact, you have to get more people involved, which is all about managing people, which is all about sort of having a shared culture and still allowing diversity within that, and sort of doing well with that. Rails today, like 98% of everything that goes into a new version of Rails, I didn't write. Like, other people wrote that. And like, that's me seeing it just working, right? Like, I get to still be involved with Rails by only putting in 2%. Like, that's how you only work 40 hours a week. Like, if I had to put in 100%, yeah, I'd have to work 120 hours and like would do nothing else, and that wouldn't be a good way to live.
So let's switch a little bit to Basecamp. I think everyone in the room knows they recently rebranded. They had many products. They went down to the one core product, and in an effort to show the sort of the commitment to focus, the name was changed from 37 Signals to Basecamp. I'd love to hear, Nero would love to hear from Jason on what he feels is the biggest positive and biggest negative outcome of the decision to focus solely on the Basecamp product since it was announced earlier this year.
Well, I think the answer will show, both those answers will show themselves down the road. I mean, we don't really know right now, but the main thing that we're doing now is by saying that we haven't actually been working on our other products for that long anyway. So Basecamp has been the thing we've always worked on, and the other products we've kind of worked on for a while and then stopped. So we were really kind of just Basecamp for the past few years anyway, but no one knew it internally and externally. And so I think that the fact that we renamed the company, that we said we're going to focus on one thing, just brings a sense of clarity and calm to the whole group and to our customers and to the market, saying this is what we do now. And when you work here, you work on Basecamp. And even though we weren't working on these other things, now they don't have to bother us because we're not working on them and we kind of don't care about them right now. We're trying to find new homes for them. And if we can't, we'll worry about them again. But it brings a sense of focus and a unified outlook on what we're all doing here together. So that was I think the biggest thing, and I think the product Basecamp will get better because of that as well. But really, it was about, okay, what are we all doing here every single day? And we over the years we probably built 12 different things that are kind of running. From our existing products to we've done a few job boards to some books we've done to some other things. And that's a lot of plates to keep in the air at once, especially when you have a very small company of roughly 40 people. We just couldn't do it. We had to admit that we just simply couldn't do that. So we had to cut back on that.
Because the point is you didn't want to add headcount to sustain it,
Yeah,
to manage it.
Right, so this is it's funny, we actually came to this decision because David and I both had new product ideas last year. We both wanted to do 2 more products. And we both had really good ideas, and we were excited about doing them. We started working on them, and we're like, who's, it's one thing to work on a product, but it's another thing to release the product and maintain the product and support the customers and market it and all the things we have to do, get the word out about it. Who's going to do that? We have 43 people. We can't even do we can't even do a good enough job on the 4 things that we have. So what are we going to do? And we talked about, well, we have to hire more people. And then David and I had a good battle about that, and we realized we didn't want to hire more people. But that's usually what companies do, is they go, we're going to hire more people. We have more ambitions. We have more things we want to do, so we want to hire more people. And that's totally fine. That's an absolutely fine direction, but it wasn't our direction. And we decided that instead of hiring more to do more, let's just have less things to do, so we need fewer people. It's something that most companies don't do unless they're hurting, and we weren't hurting. Business has never been better for us, and we just decided this is the time for us now to focus back on the thing we know best. So I think over the long term, the product's going to be better. People are going to be more focused. People are going to know why they work at the company. It's also helping hiring, I think. Disadvantages, though, there's a lot of customers who like some of our other products, and I feel like we're in some ways letting them down on a short-term basis. But I think in the long term, they're going to benefit from the decisions we're making. So we're in the process of spinning off Highrise into a separate company. We found someone to run that company, and that person's, I can't say who it is yet, but very, very good. He's going to be building a team, and that product's going to get attention, and it hadn't gotten attention for the past few years, and that doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to have customers who like something who you can't please any further than you already have, and you're letting them sit there for 2 years. But in the short term, people are like, what's this product? I'm paying for it. Is it going to change? And our answer is no, it's not going to change in the short term. And that's sort of a disadvantage. But it's just being honest. And I think that at the end of the day, that's absolutely worth it.
So can you talk a little bit about your process for sort of balancing experimentation and new ideas with like really focused product development? Is it sort of top-down ideas from you two? You have processes for collecting ideas on a regular basis from others? Like how do you come up with both experimentation and forward thinking plus just great discipline for getting product out the door and maintaining it and keeping it stable?
I don't really think we're great at it. So our process is very scattered. It's basically like an idea might pop up and we might explore it. And usually the people exploring it are me and David. I'll tend to come up with something usually, start working on some design for it, show it to David, say like, can we start hooking this up? Can we start making this thing work? And let's check it out and see if there's anything good about it. Some ideas come from other people. There's always ideas that come up from other people. There's always ideas. But as far as allocating resources to them, we're not particularly good at that. But there are things that come up that are that people just take on their own anyway. They don't ask for permission. They don't look for decisions to be made. They just make some stuff. And when those things start to get good.
Are you specific in setting out time for that, or is it just like people just do it and there's not a tight time management process?
It's kind of loose to start. It's like, okay, first of all, someone will make something like on the side, and they'll share it, and you'll be like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Let's do more of that. So it takes more time to do that, and then we'll keep looking at it. And I think the places where it hasn't worked is when people go away for 2 years and try and work on this big idea, and then present it at the end. That's too much time in between looking at this thing. But this idea that something is interesting, it pops up, it gets developed, we look at it, this is interesting, let's see where else we can take it. Oh, it's getting more interesting, let's see where else we can take it. It's getting more interesting. And then maybe sometime formal time is set aside for it, or maybe it doesn't require additional time. Like right now we have two people who are working on a whole new text editor for us. So right now in Basecamp, you post a message and you can bullet point them and number them and bold things and italicize things, basic stuff. But you can't embed images, you can't inline images, you can't do a variety of things. And one of the reasons why is because all the off-the-shelf tools that exist do things in a certain way that we're not really that thrilled with. They don't really work as well as we'd like them to work. So we've been sitting on our current system for a while. It's been based on someone else's system, and we just got frustrated with it. So one guy just started making his own new version of this the proper way, and it takes some time, and he started getting it, and he started showing it. Someone else jumped on the project because it showed promise. We know how valuable this is, and now this is something that we are doing. But this isn't a formalized thing. It's not that this is what we do every year. We don't do this every year where we decide everyone go off for a month and come up with new stuff. Things tend to bubble up. We have done a thing.
So it's organic, more or less.
It's organic. I could have just said that. But one thing I'll say though is we have formalized the process in the past, and it's interesting because we did this one thing called Pitch Day. I think this was a couple years ago, where we gave everybody a month off of work basically to just do whatever they wanted. Work-related, but they could explore whatever they wanted. And then at the end, we would all share the ideas that we came up with. And there's about 25 or some odd ideas that came out of that were really interesting. But now we have 25 ideas, and we can't do 25 ideas. And so most of them died. Almost all of them died. And that doesn't feel good either. But what was good about it is that people felt good simply about having the opportunity to explore something new. They almost didn't care if it happened or not, because for them, the value was just getting a month to explore something. So that's something I'd like to do a little bit more in a formal way, but the expectations need to be very clear, because it can't be that we all come up with great ideas and we do them all, because that's not going to happen. And that's where the letdown would begin if we didn't make that stuff clear. So we need to work on that.
So you guys are clear about we build products that we want to use.
Yep.
Yet you also, I think, seem to take really good care of your customers and care about them. What is the role of user testing in development? Like before you've actually shipped, how much user research, how much is there in a beta testing, and what is the role of the consumer before you launch?
We do very little, basically zero traditional user testing. We kind of test stuff ourselves. We over the past couple of years, we built up a very small QA team that has made our products significantly better in terms of overall quality on the ship day. So we take that very seriously, but we don't do formalized user testing. We do roll things out to 10% of the customers first before we deploy it to everybody in case there's a major problem. We can catch that early. So we've institutionalized that, and we do that. We've been beginning to do customer interviews and customer research, but not around features, more around stories and scenarios, like what is going on at your company that made you think you need to use Basecamp, and what were you hoping to get out of Basecamp, and tell me the story of how you heard about it and how you're using it and what you're trying to do with it and what progress you're trying to make with it. So more broad picture stuff, not, how would you use, give me the 5 things you'd like to do better. We don't ask questions like that.
Why not?
Because I think that, there's not enough context in that for me. Like, I want to do this, that, and the other thing. Well, why? And then you can back out. I'd rather hear the story of, I want to hear what people are trying to get done and not have them tell me what features they want, because what features they want may not be the best way to actually implement what they want. So when I'm interviewing customers, and I've done about 40 of them in the past couple months, about a half hour or so, you hear a lot of interpersonal things. There's a lot of stuff going on with people that cause people to use Basecamp or not to use Basecamp. Very rarely is it a feature was missing. They'll say it'd be awesome if we had nested to-dos and all these things, but if you listen to the story, it wouldn't have mattered at all because they couldn't get anyone to use Basecamp, period. So it doesn't matter if there's more features, it's that no one would use Basecamp. And so if we just go looking at features and try and cherry pick features that are deep in the product, I don't believe we're going to make a measurable impact on how we can improve the product and how we can get more people to use the product and improve retention, all the things that really matter. We'll just be chasing little things that don't have any impact actually on real usage of the product. So I want to understand the stories. I want to understand the root reasons why people are or are not using it. And if we can improve those things, I think we'll have much more impact than if we tweak individual features deep inside the product.
We have a bunch of Basecamp users who asked really specific tactical questions like, are you ever going to have a more robust calendaring features like 10,000 feet?
This is a great question, and we're actually
And
debating
you'd
that
say,
right
tell
now.
me why you need it.
Well, yeah, but we're actually debating whether or not we should do calendaring at all.
Does Jody want to speak up? I don't know if Jody's here.
Where's Jody? Jody, so tell me about... I'm just kidding, no. We could talk about this later, because these can go on and on and on, and they're fascinating.
We'll hook you guys up, because she's on a mission to...
We'll talk about that.
Right.
But yeah, I'd want to know, like, a calendar is a thing, but what are you trying to do is what I want to know. Like, what progress, and we can talk about this later, but these are the lines of question, like, what are you trying to do? And if it's like, I'm trying to get people together to go to a meeting, well, okay, like, maybe that's not a calendar thing. We think about it as a calendar thing because that's the only place currently you can do that in Basecamp, but maybe a calendar is not the right solution for that problem. And I just need to understand the problem and what you're trying to do, what progress you're trying to make, so we can figure out, oh, that's interesting, that's clever, let's think about this or let's think about that. So, like, one area I'll talk about briefly is the biggest problem with Basecamp is getting other people to use it with you. And so we could spend a lot of time on things like improving invitations, okay? Because that's the way you get people to use Basecamp with you today, is you invite people to projects. But that might actually be the problem. So we can make invitations better, but maybe we shouldn't even encourage you to invite people at all. Maybe you should just be able to share anything with anybody. That's not an invitation. That's a very different approach to getting people to use something that's not based on the existing feature set, but it's based on a whole entirely different idea. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm personally interested in exploring.
What's the most bizarre request for a feature you've ever received?
Improving calendaring is so bizarre. Man, I don't know. Does anything come to mind? Bizarre.
What I find interesting is that how personal some people take very specific requests. Not about sort of like whether something should be, like they put a lot of things that are otherwise going on into their life into a feature request. And for example, I vaguely remember somebody asking about being able to have priority assignments on their to-dos, right? So our answer is you can reorder them. And this person really wanted to be able to say high and low and mid and so on. And just got into this whole story about like all the stuff that she wasn't able to do, and like this was so confusing, and this was just causing all this pain. And you're like, you sort of back out a little bit, like all these things are happening because you can't mark whether something is high or low on a list of things. And I think that's natural. And people just take whatever is going on in their life, and that becomes part of the feature request. Which sometimes, if you just read that at face value, you go, oh man, we gotta fix this. If we just put this in, this person's life is gonna be miraculously improved. We can really save this person, right? By adding priority to features. And of course it's not about that, right? At the moment we have that, then either there's something else wrong, or sort of what else is going on is just what else is going on, right? You can't solve those problems. And that's why since the very beginning, I think, what Jason is also getting at is we try to act not on the request of somebody, but on their behalf. Because this is the old sort of, people would ask Henry Ford, make me a faster horse, right? Like, my horse doesn't go long enough before I need to feed it hay, or it keeps dropping literally shit all over the place. Can you fix these problems, right? Like, if you just implement a bag behind that holds it, then you've improved my horse, right? That's not really going to take anything forward. Oh, you need transportation. You need to go longer distances. You need to go faster. You need to, all these other things, right? You got to back out, and that's what you're looking at, because that's where you're going to make a big impact. That's where you're going to make a big jump.
So one of the things I'm curious about in general, no, it's all right, you can hear me. One of the things I'm curious about in general is you had all these different products to support with 42 people, and now it's just Basecamp. And I gotta imagine that what you're working on and the features and the interface, all these things can change. Knowing that you work on a utility product, something that people use every day, and fundamentally people hate change, how are you gonna get people to go along with you with your releases versus having 17 different versions of legacy software you're always supporting? Because when asked, people are like, don't change a damn thing. How do you manage that?
I love the terms that we as an industry pick for certain things. Legacy is one of those things, right? Like legacy just has such negative connotations. Legacy is like it's old, it's stuffy, it's like not modern, it's all these other things. For some people, legacy is stability. And stability is a lot more of a neutral word. I'd actually say it's a positive word, right? So if you use like, oh, we have version stability. Oh, that sounds wonderful. Can I get some version stability, please? Right? Like a lot of people would react positively to that versus engineers would think about, oh man, I got to support all these legacy products. Like that's a drag, right? So it all depends on your point of view. And I think as an industry, we're obsessed with not having legacy. We always want the new is new. Most people are not like that. Most people want version stability. I've learned this tool. Your tool is just not that important. You think it's really important because you work on it all day and you're like, oh, you see this little thing? I made it so much better. And they go like, what? Like, I gotta pick up my kids from school. What are you talking about? Like, why do I want to learn something new that's just a place where I put the files that we need? Like, I just don't care, right? And I think we just, as software makers, it's so easy to fall in love with your software and think it's the most important thing in the world. And it just isn't. For very few people. For some people it is, and some people get passionate about it.
There are finite hours in the day. You're not going to work more than 40. You're going to do what matters. If you have 70 different versions, it's messy.
So,
well, messy for who? And messy how? No,
You.
it's not. It's not. It really isn't. So it all depends on how you do it. The update, the version stability we have is we don't update 17 versions. Well, currently we don't have 17. We have 2. But which is also part of the problem, right? We like to imagine, like, what would happen if we kept doing these things and we got to 17? We're never going to get to 17, right? Like, if we do a new version of Basecamp every 5 years, we'll be at, like, 4 in 10 years, okay? 4, it's manageable, right? And also, what is the amount of work that goes into those things? So we have Classic, the classic version of Basecamp. On a day-to-day basis, half of our customer base for Basecamp is on Classic. So first of all, that's worth it, right? Half of your customers are paying you for this thing. You should invest something in it. How much do we invest in it? Very little, because we need to invest very little, because they don't want change, right? Like, they don't want the thing to change. If you wanted the things to change, you'd go to the changed version. So we have to keep it stable, as in, like, it's up, so we have to care about uptime, we have to care about security, we have to care about data integrity, and those things sort of are somewhat already built. Out of the 43 people that we have, on any given day, I'd say maybe we're putting half or 3/4 of a person into Classic. That's not a huge investment when you consider half the business is coming from that. So it's not that big of an inconvenience, and the inconvenience that it is good. You should be inconvenienced. Because if you're not inconvenienced, you're going to have the urge to create 17 versions instead of 4, right? Like, we take it very seriously. We debate. When we started working on sort of some new ideas, we were like, I don't think we want to make a new version, right? Because it does come with some costs. So you should take it very seriously. And it comes with a lot of costs, not just to your company, but to your customers. Just having like 3 versions of something, there's some confusion there for existing customers. So it's good that things are not free. It makes you realize what actually matters, when it matters, and how much it matters.
Last question in sort of the Basecamp arena. Have you been able to maintain a no meeting policy as suggested in rework?
we have very few traditional meetings. We do meet, though, occasionally. We're also kind of in this weird permanent
We just call them
meeting.
sit-downs.
Yeah.
Boom,
Yeah.
problem solved.
Done.
No.
We have a kind of an interesting culture in that we use Campfire, which is one of our products, which is a real-time chat room. And people are in there all day long chatting about all sorts of things. We have different rooms. We have rooms for people who love pets, and we have rooms for people who love comic books, and we have business rooms. Like, we have the room where we talk about all the business stuff, and then there's different project rooms for different things we're working on. And there's a lot of conversation happening all the time. A lot of people who work at Basecamp, who worked somewhere else before, they say there's more communication going on in the company than there was in their previous company, even though their previous company had stand-ups every day or Monday morning meetings. Like, we're communicating constantly, so there's a lot less need to have these big get-togethers of 5 or 6 people around a room who haven't talked to each other for a week or something like that. So we do those, though. We do those. I like to sometimes you want to sit down with somebody, you want to talk, and you want to draw some stuff out in person. It is easier to do things like that sometimes. But We use, there's technology is great. We use Google Hangouts, we use Skype, we use a variety of other things occasionally to simulate, and you can get really, really close these days to what it's really like to sit down with people without actually having to pull everyone together and pull them away from their work. But so we have a continual conversation going on, and then small teams. Also, the other thing is we have small teams working. This is a fundamental thing too. When you only have 3 or 4 people working on something, the channels of communication are pretty clear between. So you don't need to gather up the troops again and have meetings to relay information in a broad scale. If you have 20 people working on something, you probably need that more often. But when you have 3 or 4, you're talking all the time, back and forth, and you're sort of making decisions as you go, rather than waiting to push off a decision to make it next Monday at the next daily stand-up, that sort of thing. So that's kind of how we do it. But yes, we do get together from time to time in person and have chats. Another thing we started today, actually, is a couple months ago I decided that we weren't talking cross-department well enough. Like, in departments, people were not talking to each other who didn't work with each other. And so we're doing this thing called 5 by 12, which is 5 people every month. So 12's every month, 5 people. We get together on Google Hangouts from different groups in the company, and someone in the company picks the 5 people, and we just chat for an hour about anything. So today was the first time there was 5 people, someone from ops, 2 people from support, or 1 person from support, QA, designer. David and I were there, and a programmer, and we talked about, like, one guy just bought a car off eBay for the first time. He's never bought a car, sight unseen, some old classic car. So we talked about that for a while. And then another person who lives in Germany was talking about learning she doesn't speak German, but she's learning German on Rosetta Stone, and that led to another conversation. So we just have these cross-cutting conversations, and that's to me a really interesting use of an hour, more so than gathering a bunch of people in a room to talk about something they should have been talking about all along.
I think particularly with meeting is that it's often just a poor tool for productivity. Like, if you're trying to get something done, oftentimes, like, you're not really trying to get something done. Somebody's trying to say something to someone, right? Like, that's one reason for calling a meeting, and often a poor use of everyone's time. Like, that could have been an email. That could have been, there's so many options that you have that going for the meeting one, which is sort of like the most expensive, most hands-off, like, Cadillac version of productivity, and it's not even really, because it doesn't, well, maybe it is the Cadillac because it breaks down all the time, but it's sort of, it's a very expensive thing to reach for, and if that's your go-to thing, like, you're not going to be very productive. Like, as we talked about, like, I want to work 40 hours or less. So those 40 hours just gotta count. If I have to be in 6 meetings every week, and each meeting is an hour, and they puncture like the hour before and the hour after, so it's 3 hours, so it's 5, it's 15 hours I've spent in a meeting out of my 40. Yes, how am I going to get anything done? I'm not, right? You have the 40, and if you spend 15 of them just learning something that could have been an email I could have read in 3 minutes, one being just reorganizing a to-do list that could have been done in 5 minutes, it's just not a good use of anyone's time. And I think that's often, it's very easy for that to sort of just disappear because it feels like working. Well, we're in the office, we have coworkers, we're in here for an hour, like, we really worked something. And I look at it, even when we have them, I look at it afterwards, like, what came out of that? Like, so I paid 5 people to be in here for an hour, hourly rate is this much, okay, so this meeting just cost $2,000. Did I get $2,000 worth out of this? Sometimes you do, and that's great, right? Oftentimes you don't.
Again, getting back, one more question about that I was curious about. Do you guys ever look at competition? Are you ever students of what's out in the marketplace? Or, you do what you think you should do. A little bit you talk to customers after it's already in market. Like, do you care about the competitive landscape at all in your consideration of a roadmap and what you're going to do?
I think it's very healthy just to be aware of things, but looking, it depends what you mean by looking at competition. So I'm aware, I'm curious, so like something new comes out, I'll check it out, I'll dig into it a little bit, but I'm not like, I'm afraid of, I mean, this has happened in the past, but I'm not like, I'm afraid of them because they did this that we haven't done. That does happen sometimes, and you kind of get that in your head a little bit, but we're not looking at direct competitors because the biggest competition we have is email, first of all. People just use email to manage projects. The other big competition we have is just people talking to each other in a space. It's all the non-software things that people do every day to work together. That's really where almost the entire market is.
So rework really is the greatest marketing ever, because you're trying to kill the way people normally talk so that they'll then get Basecamp.
I can't talk about that. No comment. But really, I mean, when you listen to the stories that you hear from people, there's so many things that prevent people from using any piece of software that if you can try and reduce those barriers, I think you're in a much better position to gain market share than you are trying to take some market share away from a competitor by tweaking this feature or that feature. There are good ideas, though, and I think it's very important to be aware of the good ideas that are out there and how things are changing, because, look, we have a lot more competition today than we've ever had before. There's no doubt about it, and I'm sure some of our market share has been taken away. But I don't want to get in this battle of trying to take 3% from them and they take 2%. Like, I just want to make the product much, much better, and I want to live and die on that. And part of that to me is understanding what customers actually value and what customers are actually doing and what they're trying to do, what kind of progress they're trying to make, and how we can help people who feel helpless in terms of, God, I have so many things going on, I don't know what to do, and software's too complicated for me, I've tried a bunch of things, it's too hard. Like, those are the kind of customers I want to try and get at the low end. And I think there's just a huge pool of those people who don't trust software, have tried it, don't like it, or are just using email or the phone and they could use something better. And I'd rather go sort of fishing in that lake than trying to fish from a really busy lake where there's a bunch of boats on it and a bunch of people trying to do the same thing. That's just not what I'm interested in.
All right, so with your new, I don't know if it's
that said, I want to say that can also be a blind spot for us. So when we might be missing boats constantly. There's totally possible that we're screwing up as we speak. And when I give you that answer, I might be a naive idiot, right? Totally possible. But I think that if you're going to study people and you're going to figure out how to improve your products, I think you need to, I don't think it's really good to just look at your own industry and see what everyone else is doing, because not everyone's paying attention to everything else that's going on. They're paying attention to their own problems, and a lot of people aren't looking for software, and they're hearing about software from other people, and they're hearing about tools from other people, and so a lot of people, for example, all of our business, almost all of it is word of mouth. People had a good experience with Basecamp, they're telling someone else about Basecamp, and they try Basecamp. I want that experience to be really good. They're not even shopping for competitors. They don't even know how to shop for competitors. They aren't even looking around. They're just like asking their friend, what do you use? And their friend's like, I use Basecamp because it works really well for me. And that's our opportunity not to screw up that sale, because that's a sale that could be made if the product was good and the onboarding experience was good and it was easy to use and that kind of stuff.
All right, well, talking about,
Breathe.
yeah, like,
Okay.
talking about the long haul, the distance. You look at companies that have been around not 20 minutes or 20 months, but 20 years and try the lessons learned. Where are you guys going to be in 20 years? And are you sort of the Google philosophy of you should have a 20-year plan?
I mean, I think our 20-year plan is stay in business for 20 more years. But it's not specific. That's my take.
Yeah, it's the same thing. And I also say that it's so easy to become infatuated by change. Like, oh, everything's changing. Like, it's all getting changed faster and faster and more change. No, it's not. Really, it's not. Like, yeah, Basecamp is different today than it was 10 years ago, but it's still trying to solve most of the same problems with many of the same-ish solutions. Like, things didn't actually change that much. I'd say one of the pieces of advice that I think have meant the most in setting our direction was Jeff Bezos has this saying of invest in the things that don't change. Like, if you're going to invest in anything, do you want to invest in sort of the hot new thing that's like going to be a thing just for a little while and then it goes away, or do you want to invest in some of the fundamentals? So for him, are customers ever going to want to get their packages slower? Like, is somebody going to wake up this morning, oh man, I wish it took a week to get my shit from Amazon? Nope, they're not. They're going to wake up thinking, I wish it was faster, right? So he invests like crazy in distribution centers, moving things closer and closer and closer and closer, to the point now where I'm as a consumer and I go to somebody who's not Amazon and they're like, yeah, shipping is going to be 5 to 7 days. And I go, what are you talking about? Like, how can something take 5 to 7 days? Like, Amazon Prime is like next day. Like, can't you just get it to me now? That is a huge, massive advantage, right? And they invested incredibly sums to make that happen. So what can we do on that level? So one of the things we realized a while back was when people write support, they have sort of very low expectations. People who talk to support departments from various companies, they generally have very poor experiences. It takes a long time for people to get back to them. They get a standardized reply. The reply is shit. And even if the reply isn't shit, the person couldn't help them, right? What if we could not be all of those things? What if we could reply to people in, let's say, something crazy like 1 minute? What if the person who replied to them had the power to just make things right, almost regardless of cost? What if you could write somebody on Sunday evening and still get an answer? Is anybody going to wake up like 10 years from now and wishing some of these things were not true? Nope. We made all those things through. We respond to email in 1 minute. Everyone who responds have the power to give any kind of refund, almost, or anything else that it needs to pull an engineer in to fix the problem for them, or something else like that. And we hired people around the world to answer emails at night on Sunday. That was expensive. And it was expensive in what it cost. It was expensive in how we had to grow the company. We were trying to keep the company small. Now we have 12, 13 people working support. And so one of the things that's not going to change, worth investing in.
A few years ago, I read a great study. It was like consumers like talking about their feelings, and it was like, what are the 3 things bothering you most? I'm so stressed. Technology is ruining my life or taking over my life, and I don't have enough time for myself and my family and friends. And it was from 1952. It doesn't change. Like, we think it changes, but like TV had the same effect that a computer in your hand has. Like the more it changes, the more it's exactly the same. So I saw people complaining about technology taking over their lives in 1952. It really is just the same.
Yeah, I think one of the great features of a product or a company is treating people well. Like, that is a feature. And a lot of software doesn't have that feature. A lot of companies don't have that feature. We want to have that feature because I think that, software is a series of things that it does for a lot of people and all these things, but at the end of the day, like, if you feel like shit about the company you're buying products from, you're probably gonna think about buying them from someone else at some point. If you need help, if you're down because you need help and you don't know how to use something, and it takes 3 days to get back to someone, you're gonna start in your head, you're like, I hate this company sucks, I don't wanna do business with them. We want every interaction that we have with customers to be a good one, and I think in many cases, people value that personal interaction and that attitude way over the fact that there's this one little tiny feature that's missing or it doesn't quite work the way I want. But I know when I email these people, they're very kind. They can do whatever I need them to do for me, within reason, of course. And they'll get back to me in a minute. I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving someone who takes care of me. Humans don't leave people who take care of them. And so if we can do that well, I think we don't have to compete on all these other crazy levels of change, rapid change, feature, tech. We just get back to the basics of treating people well, and I think that's sort of such an undervalued and underrated way of making products better. Is not by improving the product, but by improving the scenario around the product and the personal interactions.
So just a couple more questions, all we have time for.
Yep.
Harry wants to know, when your kids are respectively 8 and ask, why are you doing Basecamp, Dad? What will each of you say?
Well, I have 6.5 years to figure that out. So we're trying to help people make progress. And that's sort of a very broad thing, but to me, that's one of the main sources of happiness, is a day was a good day if I made progress. Like, if something got better, if something is further along, it was a better day. Like, wouldn't you want to help people have better days? Wouldn't you want the world in general to make progress? There's so many things that, as individuals, as societies, as countries, as the world, like, we need to make progress on a lot of it, and we need to keep making it. So if we can help somebody just in that small little way of making progress, I mean, I feel like I've made the dent in the universe that I need to make.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. I got to work on that. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's all of those things, because that was a good answer. So yes, the same what David said, but it's also like I like working at Basecamp. I like making things. I like the people at the company, and if I'm going to spend most of my time either sleeping or working, like sleeping's, you just do that. Everyone does that. But working, what am I going to do? What am I going to do with my days? I'm going to be able to make something I believe in. I can work with people who are really interesting and intelligent and kind and nice, and we can make something together. And that's really fun, too. It doesn't need to be always so purpose-driven for me. It's just like, I like making this thing. Just like a cabinet maker who likes to make cabinets wants to make cabinets for his whole life because he likes making cabinets. Like, it doesn't have to be like, I want to create more storage for the world. It's just like, I like making cabinets, and I want to keep doing it. Like, I like making software. I like making tools. I believe tools are really great things to make because they amplify people. They allow people to do more things than they could without those tools. Basecamp's a tool. Like, I like that about it. But I really like the people. I like the ability for us to have an impact and to share things and do things our way. I don't want to go, I cannot work somewhere where I don't believe in the people and the place and the ideas behind it, and where I'd feel like I was stifled and unable to actually do the things I want to do. And so I don't want to create a place for that. I don't want to create that place for others. I don't want to go to work in a place like that. So it's a lot of small things, but I like it. I just like doing it, and hopefully I like it forever. But I think sometimes we went to this dinner with some people. There's this culture talk that there's like 8 people or something at this dinner, and there's a lot of talk about what's your purpose, and I'm like, I don't know my purpose. I don't have a purpose really. I just like to make stuff, and I like to go work with cool people that I like, and I like to do things my own way, and I like to show people that things can be done and things don't have to be that hard, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and sort of shape the world a little bit. And that's enough for me. So I want to keep doing that. Was that all right, too?
On that note, I congratulate you both for just an awesome company and unbelievable success, and I thank you so much for being generous with your time and perspective. Basecamp guys.
Thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Big round of applause there.
Who's whistling? Because that's amazing. Really? Is it Harry? Oh, nice. Impressive. Thanks.